Let me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh, man, let's get this together here. Oh, layup. No. Shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh, my goodness. I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh, my goodness. What's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Trees. I'm taking on three of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh, my goodness. Behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't got to look. It's falling. Oh, my goodness. This guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media again. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
I mix what I like. Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here in Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Looking forward to this next round of our soccer talk, football talk here on the platform. A couple of the fellas are on their way, but don't like to keep the remixers waiting, and I'd like to start on time, so I wanted to at least jump out here. And I wanted to start with, after the initial greetings, so greetings to the good people who are here live. Peace to those who will see and hear this later. Welcome to you as well. Good to see you all again. I have a bit of trivia. I read something today, trying to do a little bit of prep for the show, for this. And I'm wondering if any of you, I'm sure some of you know this, but what is the largest, peace, CB, what is the largest Palestinian population outside of the Arab world? Where is it? Do you all know the answer to that? What's up, James? Laddie Fauge, peace, welcome. Do any of you know the answer to that? The largest Palestinian population outside of the Arab world. Dr. Nyasha, what's up, sis? What's up, sis? When are you coming back around here? We need to build. And I heard a really positive, hopefully positive rumor about you. Hope you're doing well. Good to see you again. No, but it's not Detroit. Apparently it's not Detroit. Nope. Not Somalis. Not Palestinians. So let's hold on to that. Let me see if folks come up with the answer before I get it. No, it's not in Massachusetts. We definitely need some more Dr. Nyasha around here. So, all right, Robert, what's up, Robert? Oh, I got the wrong back. I still got yesterday's background up. Oh, my goodness. Terrible. Let me fix that real quick. What's happening?
Hey, man, it's all you, man. You finished your semester?
No, we have another week and a half.
Oh, okay. But you got final exams and that kind of stuff, right?
And then after that is finals. But this last week is always kind of like a dead week because the semester ends December 6th, but we've had this Thanksgiving break.
Oh, wow. I forgot about that. That's right. Yeah.
So by the time students and faculty come back for that last few days,
that's a tough push,
man.
It's
a very tough week.
Jesus.
Nobody is properly motivated, and it's always like I always think of it as like a dead week. It's a very difficult week for everyone, but small.
I've been wanting to ask you, what did you teach this semester?
So this semester I had, as usual, 4 classes. So I had
You teach 4 classes a semester?
See, this is my ongoing struggle. So I teach at an HBCU, and we have perennial 4-4s regardless of rank, although there is apparently, allegedly, a change for the newest of new hires. But for the most of us, regardless of tenure, seniority, rank, it's 4 classes. Now, to be fair, one of my classes is a practicum, a senior practicum, so it's only a handful of students. And but yeah, so I taught the Black Studies practicum. I taught the Intro to Black Studies, and then I taught Public Opinion and Persuasion, a sociology course, one of my favorites. And then I taught also The World According to Hip Hop.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it's a
very, that's amazing.
So
hold on, let me write this down. So you got sociology. What was the sociology course called?
I keep forgetting the exact title, but it's something like Public Policy, Persuasion, and Public Opinion, or Public Opinion and Persuasion, something like that. It's my propaganda class. It's what I consider my propaganda class.
Right.
And then The World According to Hip Hop is a general elective, and then an Intro to Black Studies, and then the practicum for Black Studies, the senior practicum. So what does a practicum mean? What does that mean? So it's a project. It's a deliverable. It's sort of like an outgoing senior project. You know, you've completed the minor. You're on your way to graduation. So most students, I give really an infinite. I give them infinite options in terms of how they want to do it. So they can construct it however they want. So I've offered, I tell them all the time, you can do it as a mixtape, you can do it as a video project, you can do a documentary, you can do a podcast, you could do a published page. Now it's all got to meet certain academic standards. I mean, they're not just
for sure, yeah.
But for that practicum, I try to be as I want to let them do their thing. So this semester it's just a handful of papers. So some research papers that I'll be going over, but so it's just basically something that's supposed to sort of culminate that program.
Do they have to be a senior to do that?
Yeah, it's the senior practicum, and they have to have been in the minor and completed the minor, and
right.
So it's usually just a handful of students each semester in that class, but. So yeah,
still, man, that's like a heavy teaching load. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't.
It is. It's ridiculous, and I keep saying it's
amazing.
Yeah. So, but well, you say no easy A's, but the folks on Rate My Professor would disagree with you.
Is that right?
Yeah, because sometimes people confuse an easy A with first of all, I think there's an overemphasis on grades. But then I'm also more interested in adjusting the grading process to the student experience and to who the student is. And we get a lot of different kinds of students with a lot of different kinds of needs and starting points. So I'm looking mostly for people who make the effort to make the effort and to grapple with the work. And then I'm always trying to swing above their heads a little bit, so to speak. So I try to push them intellectually. So I'm more interested in the effort, in the struggle, in the presence. So it can be an easy A, relatively speaking, but what feels like an easy A is really more like just going through a process that feels less like a process. That's at least the way I try to think of it. But so, I mean, we do the best we can.
Is the hip hop course literature? I mean, is it part literature, part listening to hip hop?
Oh no! So that's one of the issues I try to deal with immediately. It's almost no listening. In fact, I do
really?
most of the
Wow.
listening.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I try to tell them like this is an intellectual exercise. Like we're not like so like people. I try to tell them like immediately. So if they want to switch out early, they can. Like this is not. If you thought you saw hip hop in the title and we were just gonna come in here and
play some whatever,
and play music
right?
and chop it up and whatever, I think you're mistaken. So I titled it "The World According to Hip Hop" because my point of the course is to use particularly as much of the hip hop scholarship, so to speak, that has been produced to say you can, if you study hip hop properly, it can, like most things, reveal how the world works.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, that's basically. So there is a good amount of reading. We watch a good amount of documentaries as well to try to fill in some of the gaps because a lot of students really today don't know some of the basics of the history. They don't know they come into class not knowing the 4 elements and just some of the basic things like that. And this 50th anniversary run of documentaries and things have not really helped in I think filling in the gaps of the flawed narrative and things that get left out of those stories, like hip hop activism, hip hop scholarship, the 2004 political convention. I mean, efforts. There are things that have happened that the standard stories never tell. So, and a lot of scholarship, even the stuff I don't agree with. I mean, there's been a lot of very interesting work. So we look at a lot of different things, and I want them to just be exposed to what people have been trying to do with the study and approach to hip hop and how it reveals all of the issues of colonialism and capital and whiteness and gender and sexuality and violence and commercialism.
That sounds like a serious course, man. I mean,
I think it is.
All your courses obviously are in person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. At this point, yeah.
So you're not simultaneously like videotaping or onlining these courses. This is all in person.
It's all in person, although I have used some of the videos I've done for this platform as part of the class and stuff like that. But no, yeah, for the most part, it's in person, just like a regular class. That
right.
But
still, that sounds like a fascinating. Aside from the array of courses that you're teaching, the world of hip hop sounds like it's like, man, that's like a serious cultural studies course. I mean, I think it is. I think it's. Anyway, I like to approach it that way. I do take it seriously, and then as I said, I do most of the listening because I end up assigning. And what's up, Matanda? I end up assigning as a lot of the work I assign, particularly at the end for the final project, is they have to create for me a mixtape that isn't just a playlist of songs, but the goal is to get them to make a mixtape that explains certain aspects or concepts in the course that we've been dealing with. So, like if I said, what song would you put on the mixtape to respond to me or to this course about violence? And then they, so they give me the track to listen to, and then they have to sort of annotate it and explain, this is why I wanted you to listen to this verse or this sound or this. That's good, yeah.
So that's where I get to hear some of what they're listening to, and it's like, it's like, wow, I'm old. I just, so. But anyway, as much as I love to be honestly interviewed and talk about all this, I know that's not what we're here for. Mutanda has been struggling and traveling the globe basically to it feels like you did planes, trains, and automobiles to get here. So
Mutanda, tell us what's been going on, man. What's been going on?
Did you guys do a little introduction already? Apologies for being late.
Nothing about what we're talking about. We've just been chopping it up about my job for the most part.
No, I hear it. I love it. No, first and foremost, apologies for being late. I'm literally just walking in the door at a family trip and just got back, and I'm a little under the weather. But listen, I wasn't gonna miss this for the world, and it's been a long time. So thank you for bearing with me, and excited to.
I hope you feel better soon. Yeah, no, the only thing I didn't alert folks to is that Daniel's not going to be joining us this week. He's somewhere. He's out traveling too. Is that what
he's like? I think he's in Africa and the UK or something like that.
Oh wow, where is he going? on the continent?
I think his dad. I can't remember which.
His dad is from.
Is his dad from Ghana? I can't remember.
I want to say he's in Uganda, but
maybe it's Uganda.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that's deep. Oh, it is Uganda. Lance, thank you, Lance.
Yeah. Okay.
Uganda.
And I think he's going through the UK before he gets back to the States. So.
Okay, right on.
That's
we'll have to hear about that too. Hopefully,
nice
maybe he's going to write about it. Yeah.
That's a nice trip. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I, by the way, to you both, the one thing I started off with, and I'll put it back out for folks in the chat or for you both. Trying to be a little bit prepared for today. I came across something that I honestly don't recall ever knowing, which is so the question is where is the largest Palestinian population outside of the Arab world? And I haven't seen anyone.
Palestinian population. That's that.
Because it figures into definitely one of the stories I wanted us to get to today, related to what you all have been talking about in our chat. So I'll just leave that out there and see if anybody comes up with it. I was shocked to read this. So, but if before we get to this story, Jordan is not correct, but again, we're saying outside the Arab world. Oh, there it is. My bad. We didn't even get there. Lauren got it. Lauren is smart. I knew our chat would get it. Chile, which I had no idea. Yeah, I had no idea. So when I'll bring it up. I'll come back to that when we get to one of the stories. But that's deep.
Yeah, that's
deep. Yep, and Ricky was close too. So. But of course, I knew our chat would know. But I was surprised it took this long. It was just that many people had got here yet. That's all. So anyway, thank you, Lauren. Congratulations. Hold on. I have something. I have a small prize for you. There you go. Thank you. Thank you very much. A small consolation of our token of our appreciation.
That's pretty good.
All right, so fellas, again, so we only have 3 hours. It's like I'm just playing because we do have to make way for Ear Doctor's Sunday show tonight. Sundays, we don't want to give people time. So no, I can't do 3 hours. I was just playing, but that's the window. But where would you all like to get started? And Mutanda, maybe we should defer to you since you're the hardest pressed to the hardest travel to get here and the roughest for the wear, apparently.
No,
so you should have the privilege.
Well, no, I appreciate that, but honestly, I think we can start in a couple different places. But I'll go ahead and take you up on that, Jared. It's been an interesting few weeks, right? And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm struggling with sort of the madness of the situation, if you will, because for so many reasons, but maybe first and foremost, in my timeline, thank goodness, like on Twitter and stuff, I'm lucky to follow some pretty amazing people and some people who are, I think, pretty spot on in their analysis of things. And of course, today we're going to get into football and sort of the geopolitics of that, how those things happen. But I think it's important to just take pause and just say like how deeply impacted I know I've been. My wife and I have been talking about it nonstop. I follow BPM pretty much religiously. So, Jared, when you had Mr. Hiram, I'm not going to call him brother because he's not my colleague. Mad respect to Mr. Hiram for coming on. That show was incredible when he was talking about his experiences. And I just think this is one of those things that, in my mind anyway, I think you both agree, and certainly maybe our chat agrees. It's so clear, right? It should be so clear. And yet the distractions and the conversations that are attempted to do everything but handle the real issue, the essence of the issue. And that's on purpose. But that's just absolutely been something that has given me pause over the last few weeks. In no small part as well, and I'll finish with this and turn it back over, is that in no small part also because it connects with everything else in the globe, right? There's this mentality that like, why should Black people care? Why should Africans care? And it's like, well, wait a second. It doesn't take a lot of research to know not only the regime of Israel and its place in that part of the world, but also what it does vis-a-vis that location in other parts of the world. my father's from Congo, and the two are very, very related, right? In fact, one of the, if not the largest mine, one of, if not the largest mines in Congo is owned by a Jewish individual. And I'm not conflating Zionism with Judaism at all. I'm not saying, but I'm saying that Israel has its tentacles, just like the U.S., in lots of parts of the world. And so this whole situation has just been forefront of my mind.
Yeah. I'm with you. Down here too, man. I mean, it's all over the newspapers. In most cases, I mean, there's some exceptions, but the Brazilian mainstream press is clearly pro-Israel, and I guess one of the major differences is that there's a substantial counterweight politically in Brazil, in large measure because of the presence of the Workers' Party. So you've got the Workers' Party, you've got, the Brazilian Communist Party. You've got other parties that have, both digital and real-time voices to counterbalance the narrative that's coming out of the mainstream press. And then we have Lula as president, and most of his cabinet. There are a few exceptions, obviously, because of these political compromises that you have to make. But most of his cabinet, and certainly the people that are in what might be called, the most important cabinet positions in most cases, are pro-Palestinian and critics of Israel. But I mean, it's a mess, man. I mean, it's just like, it's hard to believe. I mean, to tell you the truth, it's like, I've been sitting back and like reading and taking notes periodically, and one of the things I've concluded is that a lot of this stuff would be a lot easier to understand if we could wave a magic wand and do away with the concept of the nation state. It's like if you could see the connections between the power centers in the United States and the power centers in Israel, it would be a lot clearer without this confusion about what Israel is doing, what the United States is doing. I mean, these are power relations that are global in scope. And they basically use nation states as tools. And, we get sucked into that, obviously, because we're susceptible. If we have critical tools at our disposal, we begin to look behind the curtain and see who's pulling the puppet strings. But it's just amazing, man. And I guess the other thing that bothers me, and I'm kind of like you, Lutanda, I follow a fair number of people on Twitter. I follow a number of podcasts and YouTube channels to kind of keep up, in terms of education and what have you. And everything from my side of the fence looks like this was a false flag operation. I mean, I can't look at it in any other kind of way. I mean, it's first of all, I find it hard to believe that. I mean, everybody knows about Mossad. I mean, there is no way that Mossad hasn't penetrated Hamas a long time ago, a long time ago. And there's no way that the Israeli defense system, the structuring of the Israeli defense system, could let an event like that happen and be surprised by it. I just can't see that happening. So, whatever. I mean, that's my 60s conspiracy spin on this stuff. It's a crazy situation. you know.
I mean,
absolutely.
I've seen one or another again, at least compelling arguments for that. And I admit a sort of reflexiveness in my desire to and my bias in favor, my preference that this would not be a false flag, and that for that, you know, and that for whatever this vaunted powerful enemy might be, that it's not impenetrable and perfect. And I always think about, and again, without spoiling it, I always encourage people to watch the film. For this particular reason, I don't like to use films too much, but to film Syriana to get a view of the point I'm trying to make here. But I always think about my secondary to my job as a glorified custodian, janitor, cleaning, you know, just someone who just cleans the ship, or sits in an armory for 12 hours. One of my jobs was to be on a 50 cal gun mount on an aircraft carrier. And the reason we were there was for low-tech, slow-moving aircraft and boats, which could not be detected and picked up by the high-powered fire technology on board the ship. And
Wait, give me some context here. I kind of lost.
Sorry. The point I'm getting at is that the idea that these massive militaries and intelligence agencies are all powerful and perfect and can't be penetrated is, I think, mistaken. Mm-hmm. And the fact of my job, at least, is part of my evidence for that claim. In other words, to have two 18-year-olds on a 50 cal machine gun at night because your high-powered technology can't pick up a slow-moving boat or even a helicopter. In fact, the one bit of combat I actually almost saw was that a French helicopter flew outside of the approved pattern, and we almost shot it down. We were at standby. We were at, you know, the next word is either go or don't go. And I've never been there. I was like, oh, Lord, I didn't sign up for this. I was like, this is crazy.
What part of the world was this in?
This was in Desert Storm. This was in the Suez Canal. This incident was in the Suez Canal specifically. But my only point is that I hear you, and I've read a couple compelling arguments for this incident being false flag. I'm just admitting my bias and preference for this idea that well-organized and committed people with limited resources can create problems for this monster.
Yeah.
So that's all. I'm just admitting a bias. I don't pretend to know. I don't pretend to know, but that's just my bias. So, and I always do think about that. I was like, why am I on this gun mount? And they were like, this is why. And I was like, because you got that, and you got that, and you got these jets, and you got nuclear weapons nobody's supposed to know about. You got all this stuff on here, and why am I? So what you need me? And they were like, because none of this works. And that's why one of those attacks back in the early 90s against, I believe, the USS Cole, slow moving. It was not a high tech. These are not highly technical weapons. These are not people with, you know, millions of dollars of resources or billions of dollars of resources. So I'm like, but anyway, but I hear you and both of you. So on the one hand, and I wanted to, some of the things I wanted to bring up today, you know, the MLS banning, that is Major League Soccer banning all national flags being waved at games.
Unbelievable.
Because why? Because advertisers and you know, pro-American Western fans don't want to be bothered by all the Palestinian flags that would obviously going to be flown, because the whole world seems to be clear on who is in the wrong here. Anyway,
unbelievable.
Yeah. And then, so by the way, this is the story, one of the ones that I had seen earlier about what I didn't know about, was that this diaspora soccer club in Chile, Palestine Exists, is sort of the call. Like, you know, so people who had moved
or migrated there in the early 1900s, created this diaspora population, about 500,000 strong, founded in 1920.
That's amazing.
And they're finding a way to play and to have the people in Gaza and Palestine commemorated. And I think, and this is what MLS, this is my point. Like, this is what it would look like at MLS games. And I know they're like, I don't want that. I don't want a fan turning on their Apple TV subscription and looking at a whole bunch of people, world majority people, waving this Palestinian flag. And not just that, like the Irish, that scene of one of those Irish games where they're all in complete full-throated solidarity. I mean, that stuff is moving. I'm not going to front. And then
amazing. Yeah.
And then and then this other one, I didn't even realize this, that we forget that Palestine has a team trying to qualify for the World Cup. And they played against Australia, and the Australians stopped and paid homage and did a moment of silence and commemorated the Palestinians. And I'm like, a 1-0 game is like, that's impressive given all that's going on. So anyway, I don't pretend to know much about, but so just a couple things I wanted to throw into the mix here.
Yeah, there's another. I know specifically with the Australia match against Palestine, I think there's information going around that suggests there were ulterior motives for Australia to do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But
I should have known.
But tell me about what that means. What do you mean ulterior? What were the ulterior motives?
Just sanctions that would come down from governing bodies if they, did not, or I think a pot of money that was, all these things have to do back to,
if they canceled the game, you mean?
Yeah, that, or just if they didn't go ahead with it, or the show with this show of solidarity. I mean, essentially globally, a lot of the leagues, right? Even if you look at the EPL, the case of the EPL is really interesting, especially when we compare this to Ukraine, right? Because with Ukraine, it was all in our face, right? And the flag.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
And what was very interesting is one player, do you guys know Alexander Zinchenko, who plays for Arsenal? Mm-hmm. Yeah, left back is Ukraine. And he's kind of been, the de facto poster boy for the Ukrainian national team, and especially in the EPL. He actually put out a tweet or an Instagram post or whatever in support of Israel, saying, I stand with Israel. But it was quickly taken down.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is nowhere near, obviously, well, none, don't know internally, but outwardly, no institutional backlash, from Arsenal or for anybody. Like, he's still playing.
Right.
But obviously there's stories where, and I forget the brother's name, I'm sorry, I was driving, but, there's a player, I think, in Germany or France.
Yeah. I know there was one guy playing for the Bundesliga that got basically his contract got canceled.
Terminated, for standing with Palestine.
Ridiculous.
So
it's like, what?
I think what's especially clear in this moment, right? What's especially clear in this moment is that you have a side that is obviously the war is fought on several fronts, and this side is the Zionist side has clearly lost the narrative, right? In a way that I think even a lot of people who I follow who struggled with this for their whole lives, and it's generational for them, in a way that even they haven't seen. And part of that, of course, is the amount of social media that we have access to. But yeah, when you see the crowds, it's undeniable. In places like, for example, in places in Europe where they've outright banned it, right? The French saying, oh, don't do this. People come out in the streets, right? I think the case of Germany is really interesting because they're, excuse my language, I mean, they're showing their whole ass, right? Because on the one hand, you've got the Brandenburg Gate that's lit up in the colors of Israel. And do you remember the German national team for the World Cup was all up in arms about going to that and about how it was wrong, how they shouldn't do it. And when
Qatar.
Qatar. And when the national team was posing for their photo before a game, they all like put their hands over their mouths or something in like a show of protest or solidarity.
Right.
What's interesting now when it comes to this, it's like, and so so all of this where it's like there is, and I think for me, the maddening part, but what is absolutely clear, because lines are drawn in the sand, the maddening part is this idea that this all started on October 7th. from some folks.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's
that on October 6th,
Everything
there
was
wasn't
good.
a war,
It was
right?
good.
Like there wasn't already a state of war, you know, and it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then when you have the level of destruction that this regime is putting on not just Gaza, West Bank, right? Is settler
That's right.
violence. No Hamas, by the way, in the West Bank. So this insistence to sort of scapegoat Hamas, right, and try to change this conversation to be about something that it's absolutely not, to obfuscate for the reality that there's been a state of war for time, right? And now, how is anyone, all the people shouting, yeah, but do you condone this? But do you this? But do you this? From like liberal folks, right? Not only liberal folks. It's like, how do you look at the children now who managed to survive in Palestine, right, in Gaza? And you know, in 10 years, 12 years, whatever, if they're able to lift the weapon, how in the heck can anybody look at them with any sort of conscience and condemn them if they want to rise up against this, right?
Well, and not only that. I mean, I haven't been able to corroborate the statistic, but apparently, I heard that the ongoing group that constitutes Hamas, something like over 70% of them are orphans. You know, so it's like
in our discussion with Tahani Mustafa yesterday that Renee set up, she gets into that a little bit. That who is made up of this? Who are the Hamas fighters? These are refugees. These are people whose parents and grandparents have been killed going back. I mean, these are the people.
Amazing.
So it's like, and it's not hard to think of what both of you are saying. I mean, and this is something that I mean, to your point about the false flag, I mean, this is something that our buddy Kamal's favorite white guy, Noam Chomsky, has been talking about for years. I remember after 9/11 reading something that Chomsky wrote from the early 90s that was talking about the back and forth between the West and the so-called Arab world of creating these hostilities by imposing massive amounts of violence and occupation and so on and so forth, and almost daring anybody to respond so it can be used for further abuse and propagandistic purposes. So I mean, but it's not hard to think, if you personalize it, who's going to forgive you? I mean, I'm watching journalists on Electronic Intifada come on there and talk about my whole family's wiped out.
Yeah.
You know, like literally my whole family's gone. Who you survived that? Who's? I mean,
But the next question they face from journalists is, okay, but do you condemn?
Do you condemn Hamas? Right.
And to me, I'm like, what?
There's a famous clip yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. It's incredible. I mean, the thing that I was talking to. I mean, friend is a strong word, so I'm not going to use the word friend, but let's say an acquaintance who is Jewish, and he was going back and forth about how hard it was for him to, take sides. And I said, so there's this concept, I'm sure you guys have heard of it, called Lebensbaum, which is the German word that was used by the Nazis to justify
living room, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Expansion of space, right?
Expansion of space, exactly. And that concept was basically used to justify the move into Eastern Europe, and also justified both enslavement of the peoples that were conquered and also the genocide of those people that were conquered, right? And one of the things that, just bothers me no end is, and this is, again, mainstream media, is how the Holocaust and World War II are basically used as erasures of history in the United States. Because the Nazis were inspired by the United States. Manifest Destiny was basically a shield, conceptually,
Eugenics too.
for eugenics, slavery, and genocide. And the inspiration for the Nazis was the United States. I mean, nobody talks about this, of course. And now you see, I was talking to this dude. This is exchanged by email, and I said, as a Jew, and obviously I'm not Jewish, but I said, look, I mean, as a Jew, I think you've got to make a distinction between Zionism and Judaism. I mean, they're two different things. Zionism is white supremacy. I mean, it's just what it is. And you can't look at the legal framework that constitutes Israel and say that Israel is not an apartheid state, any more than you could say that, the United States is still a goddamn apartheid state. But I mean, certainly before the civil rights movement, you had a plethora of laws on the books in all states regarding apartheid in one way or another, from reckless eyeballing statutes to, not being able to sit down at a counter in a restaurant. It was legal. And that was the United States. So, I mean, it's like, how can you support a country that does that, And so, we went into the whole thing of Jewish identity, but it's, it's just like, dude, it's not that simple. I mean, not that complicated. You can understand this, right? Especially if you're a Jew in the United States.
There was a show not too long ago where, Jared, I'm not sure who you were speaking to, but you made a very good point, very salient point, which is, and I think in this way, certainly in my life and maybe others are kind of directly involved with people who may, have a conflict that they feel, right? Because of being Jewish and whatever, having ties. But I think the point that was made, I don't know, Jared, if you remember this, but you saying something effective, if you're in that situation, let's say you're on a university campus somewhere as a young Jewish student, and you feel some type of way, or your friend group feels some type of way by people chanting from the river to the sea and holding Palestinian flags. It's like, I think anybody can empathize humanly with this idea that, hey, on October 7th, people were abducted and violence occurred. Like, we can empathize with that. But I think you also have a clear choice, right? You can, I don't mean to be callous, but you can stay in that space of feeling the victim on your university campus in the US, or you can, again, it doesn't take a lot of research, but you can side with a multitude of Jewish people around the world and others who, for them, this situation is clear, regardless of how they were brought up, right? So I'm on that level with it, where it's like, for me, it's super clear. And I've had personal conversations with people. I actually know that I know an individual who flew to Israel to help, deliver food to displaced Israelis. And and it's like, wow, to me, at every stage of this. Funny side note as well. I think you guys know, my wife and I were in LA a couple weeks ago, watching my brother in one of his early playoff games. No lie, on the trip back from LA to Seattle, back of the plane, I'm out stretching after using the restroom, just about to go to my seat. There's an Israeli family, right? Flag. The dad says to me, and we started chatting, and it was fine. It was whatever. And he's just like, yeah, I don't know if you know what's going on. I was like, oh, yeah, I know what's going on. And he's like, yeah, we couldn't stay there. He said some other things. But I'm like, interesting. So obviously, this individual, he's on a plane right now because he can leave, right? Which is great. And I'm glad his family's safe. Good for him. Gaza doesn't have an airport.
That's for sure.
You can't fly in there and deliver aid. They're stopping the aid at the border. Right? These little ceasefires. So on every level of this, I just come back to this idea that when people try to move it away from dispossession and occupation, apartheid, there's only one reason you would do that. And that serves the interests of the aggressors, right? Because all of us who have any sort of bone of justice in us can understand that, you know, there's no way you can keep it. To think that you could be at peace, right? This whole thing about the rave that was going on when this all kicked off, you know, you're having a music festival and you feel like you can do that right next door to a concentration camp, and you don't think that there's a state of war. What a little metaphor for like.
But a slight disagreement with that last part, because I watched a clip, a discussion on Electronic Intifada. I keep wanting to credit because I've been just devouring their content. And one of the parts of the discussion was that no, the youngsters who were at that rave, they do understand that they're doing it in the context of a war. And they're in fact proudly doing it in the context of war. And then he pointed out something I had not heard before.
Great correction. Thank you. Yeah.
But to make his point, he said if you look at the reports and follow the details carefully, a lot of those kids, once the shooting started, they started running to their bags and their cars because they were all former or current members of the military, had their guns. They were just a few steps away from it. It wasn't. So this idea that it's this innocent kids and they're just there trying to have a party, and then, oh my God. And never mind did Hamas know that was going to be going on that day, and should they have cared if they did? Again, Robert, your point about the false flag notwithstanding, like Hamas doesn't care what you got going on that day, and maybe that is a good day to do it, but they were running for their guns. Those kids were like, oh, it's on. My training is kicking in. Apparently,
yeah. What a situation, man! I tell you.
But I mean, and then, but going back to that point, I keep thinking about again from 30 years ago with Chomsky is that Israel has almost it seems no problem even for their own saying no, we have no problem. We know the situation, so we're going to train our kids, and they'll just have to grow up in a context where you go to a rave and you got your tool in the trunk or whatever, because we're here oppressing these people. You never know when the oppressed might rise up. But they have no problem with paying for people to expand settlements and promising to protect them, and people basically living in the settlements for free or paid to live there. I mean, so yeah, and Israel has no problem if a few of them gotta go or they gotta fight, so be it. So I think it's a wild situation, and and I keep coming back to if the focus for some is on Israeli hostages or victims or whatever, the focus should immediately turn then to the occupation. The safest thing for Israelis is to not occupy Palestine.
There it is.
But
it's interesting you're saying that. I know this sounds a bit aggressive, but I got to say it anyway. This goes to this issue of the two-state solution, right? So first of all, as you both know, there are serious carbon deposits off the coast of Gaza, off the coast of Israel. Natural gas deposits that are, would at least in theory, if things were on an equitable basis, which they aren't, it would give Gaza or the Palestinians some notion of economic parity. I mean, obviously, they wouldn't be able to get economic parity overnight. It would take probably 10 to 15 years or 20 years or more to get economic parity with Israel. But those offshore deposits are now a bone of contention between both the Palestinians and the Israelis. And obviously, the group that has the most money and the most military might is Israel. So Israel is now exerting a certain amount of leverage. Even though we see this thing happening with Gaza, one of the reasons that I think that Gaza was staged is that I think the ultimate game plan, whether it's going to turn out that way or not, I think the ultimate game plan with Gaza was to literally push the Palestinians out of Gaza, not just to the south, but out. And part of that is related to the fact of this, Israeli notion of Lebensbomb, but it's also related to the offshore, gas deposits. I mean, you can't separate capitalism. You can't divorce capitalism from what's going on. This is about capitalism. It's about how capitalism works, in particular from its military perspective, the imperialist perspective and the land expansion perspective. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but I don't see how this thing ends unless, and this is the tough part, a two-state solution is not viable from my perspective. Even if Palestine could somehow get access to these offshore gas deposits. And it's a two-state solution isn't acceptable because unless Israel de-apartheids itself, it's an unacceptable arrangement. It's unacceptable. So the only thing that Israel can do to get itself out of this hole that it's created is by experiencing and going through and taking an initiative to do its own denazification. Without a denazification, without a de-apartheiding of the Israeli state, this stuff doesn't end. It never ends. And, at least in theory, there's a potential domino effect involving other countries, obviously, not the least of which is the United States. But, you've got China, you've got Russia, you've got a lot of players that are sitting there kind of waiting for a given line to be crossed.
Yeah.
So it's a crazy situation. I mean, it is crazy,
So just to somewhat stay within the or to bring it back to a little bit of the context of football, I also saw this piece, which I thought was interesting. I don't think I understood that Morocco was set to hold the the World Cup after next. And it's already being predicted that Palestine and the Western Sahara will be burning issues. So I wonder somehow we gotta find a way to make Palestine qualify.
Yeah, really. I think that I think that World Cup is a tripartite World Cup, right? Is it Spain, Portugal,
is it?
and Morocco? I think it's Spain,
honestly,
Portugal, and Morocco. I think it's Spain, Portugal, and Morocco together. Right.
Oh, it is. Morocco,
Yeah.
Spain, and Portugal. Oh, that
So
figures. It couldn't just be Africa.
It's all three of them. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, given that next one is U.S., Canada, and Mexico, supposedly, right?
Yeah. And you heard about the 2034 World Cup, right?
I don't think so.
Saudi Arabia just bought it. I mean, there wasn't even a bid. I mean, there wasn't even a bid competition. They just knocked on FIFA's door and said, "Here, take the check. Shut up. I'm bringing it to Saudi Arabia."
Well, so, my prediction for that would be the opposite. There will be no Palestine on the menu for that one. They're not.
You may be right. You may be right.
Saudi Arabia is not. I saw Qatar came out and said that the Asia Cup money they're going to donate at least some of it to Palestine. So there's some, at least, because I was also wondering with all the Qatari ownership in world football, I was wondering, what it might look like, even in the Premier League. But
wait, and now Saudi Arabia has a team in the Premier League.
Who?
Newcastle.
Oh wow! And they just smashed Chelsea. Wow.
Yep. So I mean, it's like the EPL is becoming this. I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, it's just it's crazy, man. It's out of control. And, that kind of brings us to another topic we were at least in theory going to talk about, which is the EPL is promoted globally as the best league in the world. And I guess it depends on how you describe best, right? I mean, obviously, it's certainly in terms of revenue, it generates the most revenue. That's true. But it is not from the standpoint of finances and attendance the best league in the world. The best league in the world is Germany from the standpoint of attendance. Attendance is, and the big dividing line between Germany and EPL is that Germany has this rule that we've spoken about it en passant several times, which is the 50% plus one share rule, which requires that all the clubs in the Bundesliga, both first and second division, have to be owned by the fans. Right? So the fans have to control the clubs in Germany. Now, there's some exceptions. There were 2 exceptions that were grandfathered in. And now there's a third exception because Red Bull, this is 2023, I guess like maybe 10 years ago, Red Bull bought a team in the 5th division, rebranded it as, I can't remember the name of it. It's Leipzig, I think. I think it's called Red
Leipzig, Bull. RB Leipzig, yeah.
Yeah, so they're now in the 1st division. So they brought, Red Bull bought that team in the 5th division, rebranded it, and now over the past, 8-10 years, it's brought it up to the 1st division. So those are the only 3 clubs in the Bundesliga that are not fan controlled, not fan owned. There's not one fan owned club in the EPL.
Yeah.
There are a couple that have, I think, board seats because they have a fairly strong supporters trust movement in England and also in continental Europe. This issue of supporters trusts where they don't own anything, but they have a voice. Like Swansea City has a supporters trust that they took control of Swansea City and then decided to take a minority stake. So the supporters have, I think it's like 19 or 20% of Swansea. And the majority voting control is with some American investors. But they fell out of the 1st division. I think they're now in the 2nd or 3rd division. But this whole thing about, who controls what, where does capital flow? I mean, it's just amazing how many investor groups from the United States are in the wind toward Europe and the UK. It's amazing. I think it's more than 50% of the EPL now. They're foreign owned.
So for me, what's really interesting is, throughout American sports, the way that the ownership structure is really interesting. And of course, Robert, you've written extensively about this, but one way all of this to kind of, I know we're segueing, but you look at when you live inside of a nation where the government says we have all this money that we can send to this really special relationship where we're dropping bombs on these children.
Oh, it's just amazing.
And yet, locally, because football is a local sport, you cannot just up and start a club and go up the divisions, right? To enter MLS, you have to put down buco bucks. So at the professional level of the game, it's a private club, and that filters down throughout the age groups. And in my own personal life, I can say to you, I run an after-school program. I'm actually straddling like 2 different worlds in the soccer ecosystem. And Jared knows this. We spoke about this, right? On the one hand, I'm the director of coaching for, it's actually called Elite Player Development, right? So this organization where essentially you have to fork up a decent amount of money to participate in our travel events. Okay. And there are reasons why I do. Listen, we have our contradictions. There's so many things I'm critical of, but this is what I do. And then on the other hand, I have the Rising Point, my organization, where I'm in a public elementary school, low income, even as white as Seattle is, this is my class is Black, brown kids. And we get together twice a week for an hour, about an hour and 15 minutes. And again, we don't even have a proper field. We do everything in the gym. But to get funding, these kids that I work with in the after school program, there's no funding for them to play ball. right? Even getting a field to improve the infrastructure, you got to jump through all these different hoops. And we're doing it. I'm trying it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. I'm confident of it. But it's like, again, our kids don't have access to these things because we would rather spend money dropping bombs on other people's kids, right? And then when you look at the ownership structure here, for example, MLS and all these other places, you're basically told in no uncertain terms, if you don't come with the money, there's no point in even joining. You're not part of it. And again, that message passed down to the youngest participants of the sport. And it's criminal.
Absolutely criminal. Going to one of the things, Butanda, that I want to do. I've never heard your own MLS story, because you worked for Columbus. But how long were you at Columbus?
I was there for 2 years.
So how did that happen? Like, how did you wind up? Because you're from Seattle. How did you wind up working for an MLS team in Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah. So there's a coach who, the general manager of the academy at the time, was a guy who I had worked with in Seattle briefly.
Oh, okay.
And there, this is in 28, 20, what was I going to say? It's 2019. And a couple of their academy coaches were moving on, right? Various things. They were European, and so the academy was going through restructuring, and my name was actually floated around a couple times. So it was actually funny the way it worked. I was actually in Ohio doing a Rising Point soccer camp, and out of the blue, I get this call from my friend who, he's actually in Austin now, but he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "Hey, man, it's been a few years. I haven't spoken to you." And he remembers working with me, and I guess he appreciated my work at the time. So he said, "Hey, got an offer or position opening in Columbus, and seeing if you're interested." And again, I was in the Cleveland area, and so I just added a day onto the trip and drove down and interviewed, and they liked me, and they gave me the job. Not right there. There was a process after, but that was pretty much it. It was just word of mouth. And the funny thing was, a couple different people sort of floated my name. And the reason I decided to do it was because, essentially to test myself, right? Because up until that point, I had been coaching in, a lower level club, like a grassroots club. And the opportunity to work in that environment with some of the top talents in the country or at that level was something that, for my own, coaching education, teaching education, was something that I felt I couldn't pass up. So much maybe to the chagrin of my spouse, who that was tough. But anyway, we're good now.
So you were out there for 2 years with your family in Seattle.
The last year my family was in Seattle when COVID hit. Hard. They came back. So the first year we were together, I got married August 3rd, 2010. 2019. August 10, 2019, I was in Columbus, and my wife and son were still here. They joined about a month later. Yeah, and then we were there. So, and then the second year it was just me. So yeah, it was tough. And then it was an easy decision to say, okay, I've had my time here and it's time to come back home.
So what was your overall impression? Going back to this issue of, the top 0.1% of the wealthy people in the United States are, quote unquote, owners of pro sports teams. How did you, obviously you didn't, I'm assuming you didn't get to meet the owner.
I did in passing. I don't know.
Did you?
Yeah. So the infrastructure has changed quite a bit now because they have everything in one building, right? They have a state-of-the-art facility now, right? And a lot of MLS teams are doing this, where they're building these brand new training centers. So the first team in the academy now do everything together or in the same space, right? When I was there, the academy was in a separate location, so we didn't rub heads as much necessarily. And then obviously different times, kids train at night, but essentially the same thing, right? We had, the kids that we would scout, because there are no tryouts for MLS Academy, right? There's a scouting network. And to be on the radar of our scouts, right, and really all the MLS clubs, these kids are playing in quote-unquote elite youth clubs, right? So it's not like, very rarely are kids being picked up off the street and then joining an MLS Academy. They're already in the expensive pay-to-play system for a while. and like most of the MLS academies start at the U14 age, and I was the head coach of the U14 group in Columbus. And
Okay, so youth 14 is the lowest level.
That's it's typically U14. Some clubs just do U15 and U17. Like it differs from club to
So
club.
go through that for me with a second, just in terms of my own edification. So it's U14, and then you said 15, 16, and 17. What are the levels?
Yeah. So different ages. So the U14s have an age, the U15s, the U16s, and I think now maybe it's changed to where U16s and 17s are together.
And you said it's scouted. It's invitation only. This is not people sending their
tryouts.
Right on.
Yeah. But in Columbus, this is what was interesting, and part of what was fascinating for me. Like Columbus is a small market, and so, and actually in part because of COVID, when I was there, our scouting process for the second year I was there was hit severely, right? Because you could go out and watch kids play.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So actually, and it was something I was proud of, but I mean, it didn't last, which I understand. But a good buddy of mine we went to the hood, if you will, in Columbus, and we found a couple kids who got the opportunity. And had it not been, I'm not bigging myself up, but I have this kind of mindset where, hey, where are the ballers who just kind of play in the street, and can we give them the opportunity? And the second year I was there, we did. We were able to give an opportunity to a couple kids who literally were just grew up playing in the YMCA, a couple Somali brothers, and I was so happy, so proud. But then you can clearly see the class differences, right? You can clearly see and everything that they're doing and how they're coming into the space and how that's completely different from one thing that was super fascinating was, I would go in Columbus. I don't know if you have either of you been to Columbus, Ohio?
I've never been there. No.
What was super fascinating is at the time when I was there, the academy trained in a place that was it was like south of the city, and it was super industrial. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and it was surrounded by some low income neighborhoods. And so the kids that we picked up from the YMCA lived 15, 20 minutes away from there. So what was super interesting is when I would sometimes go and pick them up to go to practice, but I lived with a host family who lived in the northern suburbs of Columbus in a very affluent area. So what was fascinating, I'll never forget this, right? You can picture this. I'm driving down the highway. First of all, I leave a very, very nice gated community, community that had Trump signs. And I drive, go through downtown Columbus, and it's, a little bit more blue, politically, if you will. And then I get to the low-income areas, so after I pick up the boys, low-income areas surrounding our training field, and see Trump signs, right? I'm talking like trailer parks, Trump. So I'm like, yeah, well, for anyone who says this is about class, it's like I'm witnessing that it's clearly not. So anyway, that's just a side note. But yeah, it's soccer is the same in every locale in this country. It's the same.
So let me ask you, let's imagine you're at the academy, you go out and you do this recruitment process. Mm-hmm. From kids in the, I guess, statewide or region wide, I don't know. When these kids come to the academy, one, are they being put up in dormitories? I mean, how do they stay there? And do they bring their families with them?
No, so there's a host, for the older kids, there's a host family program. Right, it's called
for all the levels, U14 to youth 18.
Yeah, you can. They typically, again, things have changed now, and I'm no longer, have my connection. Right. It's changed quite a bit. But yeah, you typically not the U14 ages because those kids are pretty young. So we actually wanted kids who I was lucky, I think, to coach some kids who were more local in the Columbus area because we didn't want the U14s traveling too much.
Exactly,
right? Living away from family. They're so young, right? And it's like you don't want to disrupt that. But the kids who live in the Cleveland area and have to drive 2.5 hours, if they keep a spot in the academy at the U15, U16 level, it's encouraged that they pair up with the host family, so that they go to school in Columbus.
Okay, gotcha.
As of right now, I don't think they have dorms. Certainly not at the complex, but it might be changing. Some other clubs do it differently. I think Philly Union have like a building that they dedicate to this. So. And it's always, hey, listen, I'll end with this, and I think we can, hopefully hopefully you're getting what you bargained for, Robert, in some of this sharing this. But like, what is evident is I got a sense, as much as I love my job, and I do love it, working with young players who are passionate, you get a sense for the capitalist production line that we're in.
Sure.
Right? And like, if a kid is there, they can have a great first year. And if they're not up to it, it's, they're gone. Somebody else comes in. Right. And that's the way it is, because at the end of the day, the goal is to get them, as many of them, into the eyes of the first team. And so it's a brutal process. It's a brutal process. And yeah, it's something that was eye-opening, but at the same time may not be for me. But who knows later? I mean, I'm still have my toes in the professional coaching world, but again, it's a different environment.
So Mutanda, is MLS required? Every MLS team owner is required to have an academy system underneath the pro team?
I believe they are now, yes.
And so what's the difference between the academy system underneath these MLS pro teams and this other thing that's out there called MLS Next Pro?
That's part of it. MLS Next Pro is essentially so basically what MLS has done, we talk about cornering the market, right? They basically created if you want to think of it like a AAA league, right, in baseball terms, where it's the league where the young players are in. And if they're, if they sign, and these are young players, and if they sign a second team contract, obviously it doesn't guarantee they'll be in the first team, but they're still part of it, right? And then their pathway into the first team might be signing directly. For some who are not ready or not deemed ready, they might go to college and then go through the draft. But essentially, it's a closed system, so it's only MLS teams, right, who are sort of in that.
So if I understand what you're saying, you've got the MLS quote unquote teams above at the top level.
Yeah, the first team.
Then you've got a layer below the pro teams.
Yep.
Called MLS Pro.
MLS Next Pro. Yeah.
Next Pro.
Yes. And one quick correction. Sorry. The MLS Next Pro does include clubs that are not part of MLS. So that's one correction, right? So there are clubs for example,
really? Okay.
Yes. So actually the league that my brother was just playing in, NISA, there's a team, Chattanooga, out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, that my brother's team beat in the semifinal, by the way. Shout out to him.
They won the whole thing, right?
They won the whole thing, yes.
Yeah.
But Chattanooga is now joining MLS Next Pro, right? Which is interesting because they're not an MLS club. They don't have an MLS first team, but they're joining this essentially a second division created by MLS.
Did they have to pay to get in there?
I don't know the ins and outs. I'm sure they
That's
did.
really interesting. Because
sure
I heard that the most recent franchise that MLS admitted, and this is like, with this year, they admitted this, the last team I think that they admitted is San Diego. And San Diego, there have been a bunch of articles about the San Diego franchise being sold for $500 million. They have no fan base, no stadium, no infrastructure, literally nothing. They have nothing, right? But whoever bought them spent $500 million to buy the rights to have a team in San Diego. And I'm thinking, this team we just mentioned, Newcastle, which is a major team in EPL. I mean, even before they were bought by the Saudis, it was a major team. The Saudis paid, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around 350, 400 million pounds. They got a stadium that seats 60,000. They've got obviously a fan network that is huge. Not to mention the infrastructure for, the team and the youth divisions below Newcastle. But I'm just like, I'm just trying to figure out, how do people, from a strict capitalist investment standpoint, how do you value what amounts to be the right to establish a team in San Diego where it's a greenfield project. There's nothing there.
So just quickly, I'm just looking this up now just to The team has been bought by a group led by British Egyptian businessman Mohammed Mansour and the Sikuan band of the Kumeyaw Nation, a federally recognized Indian tribe.
What?
Yeah.
U.S.
I don't know.
That's an U.S. Indian tribe?
It looks like it.
Holy shit.
Though I don't know anything about.
That's amazing.
I'd have to actually click on this, or maybe they're not. Yeah, they are. United States. Yeah, in California. So, but I would have to. I would really want to be. I'm really curious what the breakdown of that relationship is. And to your point about infrastructure, it looks like they're going to use the Qualcomm Stadium.
That's already
that hosted
there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So that's what they think of in terms of your point about infrastructure. That you know, I'm sure their claim is that we'll have this. We already have a stadium that's been used to host the MLS All-Star game. We're gonna get Southern California activated. I'm sure that's at least the promise. But so I just wanted to add that in there, Mutanda, before you respond.
No, that's it. I mean, yeah, it's
so my spiel about this is that it's a racket, right? And you know, it's not just a racket that's limited to MLS. So as you know, Mutanda knows this because I think Mutanda read the book, so I think he's probably got this already down.
And I read at least some of it, and I know that you got a whole section on how MLS, well, more than a section, how the MLS controls soccer.
Well, no, how the NFL controls soccer.
Well, okay, but I'm sorry, but you were advocating then that MLS take it over and run it like the You were comparing it to the Bundesliga in Germany.
Well,
they should follow in the Football Manifesto. Exactly.
Yeah, let me suggest let me try to make it more clear in terms of what I'm suggesting. Thank you very much, Mutanda. Please, everybody, go out and buy it. Please buy it. But here's what I'm pitching.
And buy Jared's book too.
Absolutely. Which I have started, by the way. So my argument is as follows, that one, just in terms of looking at the ownership structures we're dealing with before we go to the bigger picture regarding FIFA and the NFL, if you look around the United States, the four dominant sports leagues, right? The NFL, Major League Baseball, hockey, and basketball, right? Those four leagues represent respectively 124 teams across those four sports. Those four sports generate annually somewhere around $27 billion a year in revenue, right? The NFL is by far and away the largest. I think the NFL is now somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 to 17 billion a year in revenue. Major League Baseball, I think, is second at around 10. Basketball is around 8 or 9, and then you've got hockey, which is around 5 billion. But it's, that's more or less the breakdown. MLS's revenue, which is supposedly not public, but if you read behind the numbers and you do a lot of research online and talk to people who at least were former employees, either at MLS or an MLS franchise, you realize that MLS is generating a little bit less than $1 billion a year in revenue. Right? That sounds very impressive, right? Oh my goodness, $1 billion a year. But it's only impressive when you don't make comparisons, right? So if you compare what's going on in the United States with what's going on in the rest of the world, particularly if you use Europe, particularly the EPL and the Bundesliga as benchmarks, and you've got clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona and Man United and PSG and Juventus, all these world-class clubs. There you go. Real Madrid's revenue in 2022-2023 was basically the equivalent of the entire revenue of MLS, right? And this is, supposedly in the richest country in the world, right? And this is after nearly 30 years of operations. 30 years of operations. So what we have in the United States, if you look at the 29 owners of MLS clubs, plus the 124 owners of the other big four sports, you basically have, 155 or whatever the number is, wealthy individuals who are generating collectively about $30 billion a year. Let's just round the number up. That's being divided amongst 150 people, right? And my argument is that when you look at the United States and you look at comparisons with, say, the Bundesliga, where you have literally fan ownership, and you have here in Latin America fan ownership and control of football clubs, there's no reason you couldn't have fan and community ownership of football clubs in the United States. And you should. We should. But for the fact that U.S. Soccer, which runs the sport in the United States on behalf of FIFA, that's what we believe, right? Publicly consumed information tells us that U.S. Soccer is a neutral body that operates and runs the sport on behalf of FIFA in the United States. But the fact of the matter is that U.S. Soccer is controlled by MLS. And MLS is controlled by the NFL. And basically what this is doing is basically capping the upside potential of the sport in the United States. This business model of not allowing Bundesliga-like clubs in the quote-unquote pro scheme of things is not a mistake. I mean, it's part and parcel of the way they run the sport. And one of the things you'll hear people talk about at MLS or who support MLS is the last thing they want to see is promotion and relegation based on merit. They don't want to see that. And the excuse is that, oh, look at how many billions of dollars they've been investing. And of course, the drag about that conversation is that nobody wants to look behind the numbers. Because when you look at the numbers, you realize that it's a farce. This issue of protecting the billionaire investors in the league is nonsense. And it's nonsense because none of those investors are maximizing their revenue, because they're not there to maximize the revenue. They're there to get tax breaks. And the way that MLS works, which is truly unique, it's unlike any other league for that matter. MLS is one legal vehicle in Delaware. It's a Delaware LLC. So you've got 29 individuals who've invested in MLS as individuals or as corporations which they control or other LLCs that they control. And those 29 individuals basically are responsible for the operations of MLS and also for a separate LLC called Soccer United Marketing. And those two LLCs are responsible for, one, revenue generation. So Soccer United Marketing, or SUM, is the revenue generating arm of the sport for MLS. And MLS really is a cost center. It's basically about expenses. They pay salaries, they negotiate TV contracts. Everybody, of course, is up in arms about the recent Apple TV contract. It's a major milestone in the future of the sport in the United States. And lamentably, that's nonsense, right? I mean, the prior contract that expired was generating about $2.3 million per team per year. It was about 90 million overall. I think 2/3 of that 90 was being split. 2/3 went to MLS, 1/3 went to US Soccer. So now they've got a different arrangement. Apple has come in. They're supposedly paying $250 million a year for the rights to broadcast the sport. And that 250, when you divide that 250 by 29 teams, it turns out to be about 8.3 million per team per year, right? And 8.3 million per team per year is not enough to shake the apple tree at all. It does nothing to improve the finances of the sport. It basically leaves the sport treading water. And so when you've got Real Madrid generating more revenue than the entire league in the United States, and you've got the payroll of all 29 teams in MLS is basically equivalent to the payroll at Man City. So you've got, one team in the UK whose payroll is roughly the equivalent of the entire league in the United States. You've got to ask yourself, well, what is going on here? And as I've alluded to, actually, when we had Dave Zirin on that day, I mentioned this. I mean, what's going on is that MLS is there to make sure that the pipeline of black talent into the NFL isn't interfered with. That's what MLS's purpose is. They want to make sure that football, soccer does not interfere with that pipeline of talent, of black talent going into the NFL. That's why MLS is there. That's why U.S. soccer is there. Until that changes, you're going to see what amounts to be just pent-up demand for this sport. You're not going to see the sport enter the inner cities or the barrios. You're going to have the women separated from the men, which is exactly what they want. They don't want the men and the women to get together because they don't want that collective bargaining power together. So it's a scam. And it's
so the collective bargaining that women and men pulled off in not collective bargaining, I should say, but equitable pay.
Yeah, that's now being embodied in the CBA. Okay. The women, quote unquote, the U.S. women's national team, which brought suit against U.S. soccer because of this equal pay issue, in quotes, won. And I say in quotes because, yes, they're getting equal pay, but U.S. soccer basically controls their schedule. So the schedule of games that the U.S. national team plays is not in the hands of the U.S. national team. It's in the hands of U.S. soccer. In other words, U.S. soccer dictates exactly how much money both the women and the men are going to get paid, regardless. Now, the interesting thing is that regardless of the World Cup that's being played, whether it's men's World Cup or women's World Cup, the pot of money that the quote unquote national team brings home will be split equally between the men and the women. Now, that's interesting. I think Sweden is doing that. There's some other countries in Europe that are doing that too. So that's a step.
They also know it won't be that much.
Exactly. Right? It's not going to be that much.
If I may, and Jared, seeing as how you at least one of your daughters, fairly serious about it. I want to ask the question, and this isn't a disagreement, Robert, because again, even in our conversations in the few years that we've known each other, something that I think about from sort of a radical black politics point of view is, so what? Now what? In terms of this, long ago.
I think you're right.
No, because let me flesh this out, because you asked about my experience in the pro academy, right? And part of my, I guess, I know, I'm very aware of the spaces I was setting in and sort of what it was all for. But now when it comes to this issue of how does the way that the pro game is set up in the U.S. and the money floating there, and how does that affect kids, and then what is our responsibility from a radical black politic lens in terms of maybe just not just this sport necessarily, but this sport and sport in general, our engagement with it, and maybe this sport in particular. You understand my question, both of you? Like, because I come in, Jared, again, I would love your thoughts, because I find myself wrestling with this a lot, right? And it's kind of why I do the work that I do, where it's like I have to be in the inner cities working with our kids playing this game, but I often question, for what? For what purpose? Because I'll be perfectly honest, it's not for me the goal of I want you to be in MLS, or I want you to be. I've released myself from that a long time ago. That's not my journey. That's their journey. But this is coming from someone who played pro, whose brother currently plays pro. That's a very personal journey. But when it comes to living in this settler colony, when it comes to surviving in this world, right, what is it for? So I guess that's
so. Just quickly for me, we again had another version of this conversation in our household literally this afternoon. I
and I'll say it a little bit differently here, but the point for me is I don't care. And I don't need for my daughter to feel like any of her destiny is tied up in this sport or in achieving some goal, or certainly with some, which is not realistic for us, but this idea that she would represent either the U.S. or Panama's national team. Like, none of that is, and to the point of some of the pressure or the impetus or the inducement put on a lot of kids around the world is for them, like, this is the only way out, or this is the only hope I have to not live in these conditions. For us, that's honestly not the case. In fact, quite the opposite. Like, this is a lag on what we expect for her career to be. To be honest, like, she's like, this is
Right.
So it's like so some of it is just that natural. If you see someone you love doing anything, you want them to do well. Like I don't care if she's, out in the,
Sure.
They were doing sand castles in the playground. I'm like, I want that castle to be the best. Like, build that, like, I don't really care what it is, but so that's part of it. I think if I'm getting to, like, I don't, and I want, it is this contradiction. I want my children to be happy and be fulfilled. And at the same time, I don't want what they're doing to be furthering this project here. And I don't know how to, so I'm still working on finding a balance in terms of that, how that goes. But no, the short answer for me is I'm not, if I'm hearing you correctly and even responding correctly, I don't care that much. And in fact, we were saying, like I was telling, in the context today, for instance, it was, we were joking and the joke started, do we start to Randy Jackson do we start to get like the Jacksons with the,
Oh my God.
Like, that was the joke, or Richard Williams. And I've been telling my children forever, like, years ago when they were young, we watched an older documentary about the Williamses. And I told them, and they were very young, probably too young to probably catch everything, but I told them, like, this is not going to be my style of parenting, for better or for worse. I'm not that guy. Like, I don't need you to be out here. First of all, I physically and otherwise am not going to be out here hitting tennis balls and kicking soccer balls with you all hours of the day. I'm not going to be putting it on you like this has to be your thing. If you're self-driven and do it, I'll support it all the way. But I'm not going to, would you, like, on a day we have options, I'm less likely to be like, I demand that you go run and you train and you spend hours. I'm not, honestly, I'm not. So I would tell them, like, if you want that, you do have to have a level of that, but it's going to have to be self-driven, because I'm not going to be doing all this. So when you look at Venus and Serena, if you desire any of that success, you will have to work that hard, but you're gonna have to find another. I'm not that guy. So we were saying that again today, like, and ultimately it came back to this, and then I'll stop again here. But just that I don't need for you to be, whether you play soccer well or not, I'm gonna love you the same no matter what. But it's not part of, and then we have other goals for you and other interests, and you have other interests, as we were talking about with them today. Like, this is not, so.
No, I hear that, and that's beautiful. Part of the reason I asked the question is, again, I think when we, in these spaces and how it ties in, like, the most important, the reason why we're here, which is the state of our global community, right, and dealing with the state of the world as we're in it. I actually referenced forgive me if I butcher this, Jared, the Vernon philosophy of movie avoidance.
Black media avoidance.
Black media avoidance. That's right. I've heard you talk extensively about that. Robert, are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not. I don't know that one.
Jared, you want to sum it up?
The very short. It's named
Black
after a
media
buddy.
Avoidance.
Yeah, the Vernon philosophy, and Vernon is a brother I used to work with at a pizza joint, and years ago we were standing out, and he said, I don't want to see any more movies with black people in it. And I was like, why? And he said, because we always look bad. They make us look bad. So I just want to see the whitest movies that don't have, And then so my joke was decades later and a whole bunch of debt and degrees, I came to largely the same conclusion that given the context of this society, the settler colonialism and the role that media play in a society like that, no oppressed group should look to see itself in the dominant media that's imposed on us, because it's always going to be a false representation. It's always going to be some disturbed version. So yeah, so that's somewhat, yeah, but that's it, yeah.
And what I love about that though is that it's not passive, right? There's a removal, there's a distancing from this media that is not meant to serve you, but there's also a critical lens to it, right? And again, I've heard you speak about it often, and that's what's beautiful is that you're able to look at these. It's not that you've seen movies featuring us, of course, but you're able to read through it and see it. The reason I think, and I'm not saying I'm the first one to offer this. However, this is the way I think of it. It can be applied to sports, right? In the sense of that's essentially media, but taking it from the athletic point. And that's why and with respect to your work, Robert, it is fascinating, but I've always come at it I've asked myself the question before, do I want the United States to be a dominant power in world football? That just simple question. The honest to God answer is, I don't care. Why? The Vernon philosophy of Black media avoidance in a way, because I know that to whatever degree the U.S. internationally, and whether it's the domestic league or the national teams as they compete, whatever success they have isn't going to necessarily coincide with the uplifting of my people and with the children that I work with, right, who are they're 4th and 5th graders, but they're just picking up a ball for the first time. My goal isn't necessarily, hey, I want you to go play for the U.S. national team, because I look at it and I'm like, if that happens for them, great. But could I consciously, and maybe some people, maybe not in this chat, but I can hear people sort of critiquing this, right, and saying, well, he never had a chance to play for the U.S. or he didn't, so it's easy for him to say it. And I can turn my back and say, listen, I took this to its final conclusion for me, and I tried to do it. At the same time, I'm 100% aware that when you go up those levels, the contradictions become even more stark, and you realize what you're being used for in a way, and what you're being, imagine and MLS is more diverse now than it used to be, but imagine the brothers now playing in MLS who now get that headline hey, we're banning all flags, all foreign flags or whatever now, and these people, they got to go and stand up and to me, it makes me sick. Quite honestly, it makes me sick. So is my goal to churn out the next, a Black Messi? No, because I know what a Black Messi or a Messi from the inner city of Columbus or whatever would potentially be used for. At the same time, I'm an educator, and I love this sport as a vehicle. So I guess maybe this is my own therapy session to say, I kind of take it in at a removal, right? I have to. So I like watching the Premier League because it is diverse. It is, there are top players there. There are other leagues as well. But this is my way also of kind of segueing, the international game that just happened, Brazil versus Argentina. The amount of the storylines going on there, it's just fascinating. And personally,
so I saved this comment from earlier.
Yes. So okay, thank you, Lance. Here's the thing. We had a show where we talked about who we thought the greatest players were or are, right? Listen, I love Leo Messi the player. Right? Love Leo Messi the player. He's a phenomenal player. Probably the best player I've seen in my eyes, my opinion, okay? Now, that being said, I can't watch Argentina without cringing. Right? And I hate the way that they won the World Cup. Right? Because I can point to certain situations where, and I'll be very, very, very specific. When they played the Netherlands, there was a player, forget who it was. It might have been one of their center midfielders. He committed a yellow card tackle. He tackled somebody way late from behind, clearly a yellow card. My man proceeds to get up from that tackle, which in some referees' eyes might have been straight red, gets up from that tackle and blasts the ball into the into the dugout, into the bench area of the Dutch team. Paredes, yeah. So and my only point in saying that is, you have this Argentina team. I'm watching this, and my brother and I were both looking at it like, yo, how is this dude not being sent off, right? And my point is, I think there's a lot of credence to the idea that, I'm not going to say they gifted Messi the World Cup. That's nonsensical, because I saw the games. I see people working hard. They could have lost any number of those games. However, does FIFA, and obviously MLS now, but all these leagues, do they stand to gain from this fairy tale of Messi finally lifting the World Cup?
Hell yeah.
Does it affect things in terms of what's going on? Hell yeah, it does. My man is in the US now, chilling, making all this money. It's not going to do anything to change the dynamics of who has access to this game at the community level. Not a damn thing.
I think you're absolutely right.
If anything, it's stratifying it even more, right? Because, Robert, you saw this. I think we were having this on our group chat where people had tickets to go watch Inter Miami. Messi wasn't traveling. And all of a sudden, you're getting all these resales and people aren't selling tickets anymore. And if they do know he's playing and he's traveling to a city, what happens? Ticket prices get jacked up. So we know what this is. So anyway, I just say, like,
$3,000 was the cheapest I saw in DC when he was here last summer. I was like, you got to be crazy. So, but real quick, I want to add in there that Martinez goalkeeper for Argentina.
Yeah.
I hate him and Koke from Spain. When I even get them as packed gifts in my FIFA game, special cards, immediate sales. I can't have them on my squad. You can't be on my squad. And when Martinez did the whole monkey thing with Mbappe after the World Cup, come on, man. When they were celebrating the win, he held up a little monkey and was like,
are you serious?
Yes.
Listen, it's well documented. And even for anybody who looks at the
Never
game.
mind that Mbappe put all those goals past his punk ass.
But
he had to.
This is what's so fascinating, right, about the game, is that there's no way as a black person, right, especially if you have a certain politic, there is no safe place.
Yes, Eric.
There's no safe place, because that World Cup final, France-Argentina, right? It's like, on this one hand, you watch this. If you say you want France to win, which by the end I kind of did. I wish they had won.
Oh, I did.
And we know about France, right? We know what they do. We know how they use their black players, and we know that they're black when they win, and they're whatever else.
The most African team in the World Cup is France.
That's right.
But we also know, you look at Argentina in South America and how you have no black players. And then it's just a quick little research to see the whitening of Argentina and how
the whitening,
they're not shy about it. They're proud of it.
The whitening of Argentina was genocide. Let's just face it.
There it is, of course. Yeah. But it comes coming full circle back to today. You watch Argentina, Brazil, and you see these touch points, these, and it's like, on the one hand, how do you watch this and really try to keep saying, I have to apply some sort of Vernon philosophy to it to understand the pro game, the national team game, whatever. It's a rich men and women's thing that over there. I'm doing something else. And yeah, I can engage in it. I watch it, but it's not for us. It's not for us. And I just,
It is difficult. It is difficult. Even today, when I watched that golazo from Garnacho, that incredible goal he scored, I was like, it always is a little pang, especially when they go over the crowds. It's the same thing I used to feel about watching sports here or going to a game here. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to support any of it. So that's, again, part of why I'm saying, even about my daughter, like, I mean, yeah, on the one hand, she's not threatening a World Cup roster at this point. But on the other hand, good. Like, I'm fine with that. I don't need your life and your aspirations to be caught up in that hope. And I feel sorry for those who see that necessity and realize that is the best way for them and their family, because Yeah, but I was wondering how. So just quickly, did I miss? So I misread the story then. So you mentioned this, Mutanda, a minute ago. So the MLS banning of flags was specific to all foreign flags. It wasn't all. I thought they had done a blanket. No, not even. So, but they're like, American flags are good.
How could they? I don't remember.
I know. How could they not? But right. But yeah, right.
Basically, what happened, just like in all the other European leagues, white leagues. They're not dumb. They know what the people are saying in the streets,
Yeah.
right? And they know,
And in the stands.
and they know that if we allow this, the DC United game, because the thing, you say what you want about soccer people, and that's why I think there's a small sliver. I'm gonna say small because how could it be anything except small? But there's a great segment. For example, the people on this call, right, and listening to us, but there's a segment of people who appreciate the beautiful game as a microcosm for just life and revolutionary struggle, right? It has all the elements there. That's another topic, right, that I'm trying to write myself on. But the point being, a lot of fans who go to these games are politically inclined to side with what we're saying here about Israel's genocide.
Look, again, Robert had another example for us in Egypt. Yeah. I know this is Egypt, but I don't think Egypt. When I went to I took my daughter, we went to see DC United this, what was it, in August?
Yep.
And
we'll get it.
But, so it wasn't political, but DC United, I'm not even so sure that's not a straight Latin American
crowd. There are a lot of ethnic people support that club. No question.
It was our whole the ultras. My daughter was like, "Wait, did they do chants in Spanish?" It was like most of the chants were in Spanish, and then our section. I honestly don't think there were any, or not many at all, white American fans sitting in there. It was like a very black and brown and world majority people crowd. I was a little bit shocked, to be honest. I was like, damn. And I'm sure if they, after October 7th, because I was actually I was tempted just to go just to wave the flag. Like I was tempted just to get a ticket and just go to a game just to be. Because I know that they fear that's what that crowd will look like when they try to do their little sideline reporting and post pregame. They don't want all that in the background. And I know the advertisers are like, you better clear that up immediately. We see what's happening in the world. We better not turn on one of these games on my Apple TV and see one Palestinian flag waving.
These people aren't stupid. These people aren't stupid. And the difference between the NFL and the MLS, right, is that they're run by the same similar people. The NFL knows the clientele it has, just like MLS. So the NFL I don't even know if they had to put a statement. They don't have to do that. Type of people who go to these games. They didn't have to put out a statement. But in both places, the MLS and the NFL, they're doing they're doing the field size flag. They're doing the flyover. They're doing the military nights. They're doing that. It's just
we timed the walk-in. We set up the whole thing. We went to the game. We stayed out of the stadium until after the anthem because I didn't even want. Because I was even more worried about I was like, I felt defense. I was like, I don't want her in a situation where we're sitting through the anthem and somebody says something stupid, and then I say something stupid, so or worse. So I was like, we're just gonna hang out here, get a snack. Walk around while they're doing the whole anthem thing, and then after they wrapped that up, we went and took our seats. But yeah, they're doing the whole thing. They got the whole military joint. They got all that stuff. But when you get into, again, to your point, at the DC United game, that's not an NFL crowd, and
that's
so
sure. That's what
they're getting all that propaganda, and that's what they're worried about.
Exactly. That's what they're worried about. So here's my.
It's the exact same in Columbus, by the way. So even in some of the most and I'm saying this from personal experience. So, but Robert, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that first of all, just let me philosophically and politically state that I support your position like 110%, because there's just no escaping the current paradigm. The current paradigm is what it is, And but one thing the reason I wrote that book was because one of the challenges we face in terms of the United States and the globe is how do we not only effectuate change but create change that is substantive and sustainable, which I don't think is easy to do, particularly when you're in the imperial core, right? I mean, how do you change the imperial core? And so one of the hooks that I'm focused on in that, in an attempt to answer the question, and I'm not even sure there's an answer to the question, quite frankly. But one of the hooks that I'm focused on is consciousness and consciousness raising and empowerment. And so my thesis, which I elaborated on in the latter part of the book, was because what I concluded in the latter, I think it was the last chapter, maybe it's chapter 6, I can't remember, I have to look back. One of the things I concluded was that with the advent of technology, and one of the things that kind of got me to thinking about this, and one of the things that drove me to write the book was technology. So the book basically came out of my experience of the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, right? And the largest group of foreigners in 2014 in Brazil that came to see the games were from the United States. And the other thing that struck and caught my attention was social media. Like the social media platforms, particularly Twitter, but the other ones that are related, exploded in the context of the 2014 World Cup. And I thought, damn, this whole thing with technology is really interesting. And here we are. This is 9 years later. So I was looking at this happen, and I thought, and you will remember this, right? Both Twitter, Airbnb, and Uber were relatively new, particularly Uber and Airbnb. They were still new, right? But it became very obvious, and now we know for sure because it's been confirmed, that you can literally generate billion-dollar enterprises based on an app. And no better proof exists than Uber and Airbnb. And of course, there are now others out there, right? So my thing was, well, how can I marry technology, like that kind of technology, and attack the problem of consciousness raising and grassroots empowerment using technology? So that's really why that book was written, right? And that's what I'm still wrestling with as I'm speaking to you. I'm like, I've got this quote unquote phase 2 of the project. Phase 1 is the book. Phase 2 is now, well, how do we get this idea off the ground? Because if we can bring a Bundesliga-like structure to the United States where people at the community level are owning and managing and promoting clubs, and along the lines that I've described before with, I'm wearing my Flamingo shirt today. The Flamingo Club, which is a multi-sport club. They got basketball, volleyball, wrestling, gymnastics, the whole 9 yards, right? I'm not saying you have to go whole hog in the club concept like that, but I do believe that club concept has potential in an urban context. And the question is, well, how do you package that? How do you make that work? So that's the challenge and the dilemma that I'm, quote unquote, working with. And one of the things that I came up with, and I still believe this is true, and this is actually, I think it's in chapter 1, which is about branding. I am absolutely convinced that there are brands that have not been discovered in the United States that tap into a psychic level that has never been explored in professional sports. And that you can use these, I'm going to say, quasi-Jungian concepts of archetypes to drill down and make connections at the grassroots level And it's a grassroots level that's not spending their money at NFL games, NBA games, hockey games, or baseball games. So that crowd of people that Jared found at the DC United game, what I'm suggesting is there are probably, and this is my own demographic research, which is subject to question, right? But my back of the envelope demographic research tells me that between 1990, when the United States had 250 million in terms of a population, today the population is 330 million. That 80 million growth of people over the past 30 years, roughly 30 years, is the population of Germany. And my argument is that probably more than half of that population.
Not people from Germany, but the size of Germany.
Yeah, the size of Germany. Yeah, the size of Germany. So my demographic research tells me that if you look at the United States as a whole, there are at least, and I think I'm being conservative, but I think there are 100 million football fans, hardcore football fans in the United States. And this is not counting fans that are cheering and spending money on the other four sports. I'm talking about 100 million people who do not spend their money on the other four sports. They can't afford season tickets. They don't go to NBA games. I mean, the only people that go to NBA games that have money are very, very upper middle class people. NFL games, NBA games are very expensive. People of color and even European ethnics are somewhat fans of hockey, maybe, but not much. And baseball
not anymore. Not after that brother accidentally killed that dude.
Whoa,
that's a whole other thing.
That's another story, right? Jesus Christ.
God.
That's some crazy shit. And then there's baseball, and baseball is not people. When I was growing up, black folks went to baseball games. Mm-hmm. So my argument is that there's a marketplace out there that can be tapped into using rebranding and technology, and this new concept of a sports club that can, be used as a mechanism for education and consciousness raising. And it has to have that component. So there has to be, some kind of notion of quote unquote, consciousness raising in an educational context in the context of the club. Right. And so what I'm suggesting is that can be done. And we need to have a pilot project to do that and prove that it works.
So listen, I'm sorry, Robert, just for the interest of time, and we're coming up on 7:00 Eastern time. And I feel myself running out of steam, to be honest. And I want to get comfortable because I got to get my good seat ready for the ear doctor at 8:00. But what I would like to recommend or suggest as a tease to our next conversation, and my apologies to you both publicly, it's been my fault that I think we haven't reconvened here sooner. But I think we should revisit the relevant chapters of your book for that particular argument, and have that be the starting point for the next one. That would be
That sounds good.
And then we'll, of course, look to get Daniel back in the mix and hear about his trip as well, which I'm sure is.
Let me ask Mutanda one question in closing.
Sure.
I stumbled on an organization that is an offshoot of Major League Soccer, an offshoot of MLS, called Black Players for Change. Have you heard of these guys?
I know. Excuse me. I know the players. Some of the players involved who headed it. I actually have one of their, so I'm aware of it.
So, I mean, I'm checking this out. I'm thinking, well, what does that mean? Now, I went to their website, they were looking for.
Can they join you? Can they come through at some point? Like, what's that all about? I don't know anything
about
this.
Check it out.
Well, that's all. So I agree with Jared. I think we pick it up at another time.
Yeah. I'm just want to throw that out there,
No, absolutely.
Another great tease.
Yeah. And I'll say in closing and then I'll turn it over. But first of all, thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Jared. As always, man.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I did this. It's nice therapy for me. Apologies, a little under the weather, but what you suggest, Robert, I think is possible. the only thing I would add to it is, in my own small way, and there are others, I'm not alone. There are people who are trying to do that work, but then it's not necessarily though with the goal, and let's be clear, or with the ability to reach the top level of the game with that organization. So for example, Rising Point, I have no desire to turn that into a professional feeder team or anything like that. However, your point about engagement with technology and obviously the game itself, the game is a guide, and then the conscious raising, right?
Right. Yeah.
Trying to be a coach and educator for conscious raising. And my, again, not solution like catch all necessarily, but one way that I'm trying to go about it is by placing this organization in schools. It's more
absolutely. Yeah.
It's more accessible to kids. And we have a chance to do something I think really remarkable, obviously with better infrastructure, which I'm working on, to have a multi-layered club environment in which, picture this, right? I know we got to run, but a school environment where you have after-school soccer, but it also serves as a political conscious raising endeavor, right? You have high schoolers mentoring younger kids. You have kids learning any number of different trades. And this takes place all in one center. And of course, the game is there. World global football, soccer is there. It's not the only thing, but it's a way for kids to be in community with one another, and having that as sort of the launching point for political movements, right?
Yeah.
So that's a vision.
I'm with you. That's a nice place to leave it. That's a nice place to leave it.
Yeah, there's more on that.
Brother Jared, thank you very much.
No, fellas, thank you. This is, again, Mutanda used the word therapy. This is definitely therapeutic. I appreciate you. Thanks to all those who are here with us in the chat as well. Peace and shout out to Daniel on the road, Daniel on the run eating for all the hip hop fans out there. We'll call him Dory for a minute. All right,
Daniel, if you're listening, we're hoping you take some pictures. At least you take some pictures and videos of.
No, we need notes. He got an article to write, I'm sure, and got some podcasting to do about it, and then he can come through and talk with us a little better. So
exactly.
I apologize in advance, but I'm going to say it anyway because I can't get it out of my head. So the revolution may not be televised, but it will be played. Catch you next time here, and I mix what I like. Peace, everybody. If you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. Thanks again, everybody.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.